Welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Waltham Forest Council. Please be seated. I'm pleased to inform members that we are testing our new webcasting equipment at this meeting. Tonight, our meeting will be recorded before it is uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel tomorrow. Should the test be successful, we will begin broadcasting our Council meetings live from February. It is important that members are seated in their allocated place for their name to appear correctly on the recording when they speak. Members of the public will not be visible in the broadcast, either when addressing the Council or when seated in the galleries. If we need to use the electronic voting system, the cards are already in the slot and you need to be sitting in your appointed seat. I've received apologies for absence from Councillors Claire Coghill, Shabana Dedi, Mitchell Goldie, Andy Hempstead and Catherine Samares. Are there any other apologies from councillors?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to give apologies for lateness from Councillor Oshu and Councillor Pye, and other apologies from Councillor Mbatu, Councillor Simon Mahmood, Councillor Johar Khan and Councillor Masood Ahmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Terry. Declarations of interests. Do members have any declarations of interest? Okay. No. Okay. None. There are none. Thank you. Minutes of the Council meeting held on the 18th of October 2018. Please turn to item 3 on your agenda, minutes of the meeting held in October. Are you happy that I sign the minutes of the meeting as a correct record? Thank you. Whoops, that's okay. Thank you. Okay, the order of business. With the permission of Council, I propose to take item 15, Codes of Conduct, IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, straight after we have heard our speakers from the public. Is that agreed? Thank you. Announcements. We shall now move on to announcements, and I have a number of announcements to make. Sadly, I must begin sombrely, and I would like it recorded that Council offers condolences to Councillor Murray Pye, who recently lost her father, a prominent councillor and former mayor in Kent, and to Councillor Jerry Lyons, who lost his mother. And in doing this, I would also like to acknowledge the passing of Councillor Keith Rayner's mother earlier in the year. Our sympathies are with you all. On a brighter note, but one born of sadness, I last week attended, along with a number of my colleagues, an unveiling at Davies Lane School of a memorial to former Councillor Nicholas Russell. His early death robbed Canhall and the Council of a hard-working and principled man whose life was built on a foundation of altruism, and I was honoured to take part in the commemorative event, and I hope that we may all take some inspiration from his life and memory. On to other things. I'm delighted to announce that I have a newly appointed Mayor's Youth team, ably led by the now very experienced Luke Doyley. The team comprises Luke Wilmoth, Gulchin Sari Yildiz, Joshua Robinson and Faith Agba Butler. Those of you who attended my Christmas dinner at Waltham Forest College will be able to attest to their professional and confident approach to supporting me, and especially the hard sell on the raffle tickets. And in mentioning my dinner, I'm pleased to say that more than £1,000 was raised, and I offer my thanks to those who attended. And importantly, I offer thanks to the staff and students of the college for their hard work on that night. I'm back in the college for Burns Night on the 24th of January, and details for that should reach you very early in the new year. And before that, of course, we have the Civic Carol concert in the Assembly Hall next Tuesday, the 18th. Before I close, I want to mention two council-run events that I particularly enjoyed attending: the Halloween Family Night in Leighton Jubilee Park and last week's Santa Dash here at the Town Hall. Both events, organised by Joyce Guthrie, were great fun and very successful, and I heartily recommend them to you for next year. And finally, I would like to remind members to be respectful to each other in the chamber. Please remember to address your comments and speeches through me, the Mayor. Finish your statements when instructed and respect the use of the gavel if necessary. Thank you. Are there any other announcements? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On February the 27th, 2018, we were incredibly proud and honoured to be chosen by Mayor of London Sadiq Khan to be the first ever London Borough of Culture. 2019, our year as the first London Borough of Culture and the most exciting year in the history of Waltham Forest, is almost upon us. It all begins in earnest 4 weeks tomorrow. If you haven't already, make sure you put the opening event in your diary. It will take place between 6 and 9 p.m. on each of Friday, January the 11th, Saturday, January the 12th, and Sunday, January the 13th. Inspired by our year's themes of radicals, makers and fellowship, Welcome to the Forest will be the biggest party Waltham Forest has ever seen, and everyone is invited to this free event. This town hall will be transformed through a high-octane audio-visual show created in a unique collaboration between musical producer Talvin Singh and video artist Greenaway and Greenaway, students of Leighton Sixth Form College and electronic music producers from the borough. This will be joined by a new commission from world-renowned artists Addictive TV, presenting the soundtrack of the borough through the video remixing of Waltham Forest's rich and diverse musical talent. Locally based international festival curators Continental Drift will transform Forest Road into a neon-lit celebratory winter carnival featuring groups and individuals drawn from the borough and beyond. In Lloyd Park, epic lighting installation Nest from artists Marshmallow Laser Feast will transform the familiar into the fantastic, accompanied by a transcendental soundscape from composer Erlen Cooper, created in collaboration with local choirs and schools. We have involved 1,079 local people, of which 935 children aged between 5 and 10, to create this project. It gives me great pleasure to say welcome, welcome, welcome to the Forest. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to address the Chamber, if I may, and through yourself, around the rough sleeper count and the severe weather emergency protocol, which I know is something that many members will be very interested in. Okay, members will know that every year authorities are required to complete a census account of rough sleepers within their borough. We have between October and November each year to do that, and we chose to do ours towards the end of November. In fact, just 2 weeks ago tonight. I would like to give my thanks to our rough sleeper coordinator, Pauline Jones, Modesta Anucha, Jonathan Joseph, and the team led by Darren Welsh for the amazing work that they put in to organising the count, briefing volunteers, and making sure that we had as much intelligence as we possibly can, working with our partner agencies, St Mungo's, Branches, Forest Night Shelter, and all the other charitable organisations there are providing services to the homeless and rough sleepers across the borough. I wish to put that on record. And I also, most importantly, want to thank the staff, many of whom volunteered, having worked a full day in their offices on Thursday, the 29th of November, who then arrived at the YMCA for our briefing at 1 a.m. and carried on until almost 5 a.m. and then in many cases went home and came back to work the next day. I'd like to put on record my gratitude for their dedication and their commitment to some of our most vulnerable residents. Now, as members will know, the rough sleeper count is purely a snapshot. We cannot say that it gives us a definitive picture of rough sleeping and homelessness across our borough, but what it does do, the figure this year was dramatically lower than it was last year, and we can take some succour that some of the interventions that we have put in place over the last year are starting to have an impact. Members will know that following receipt of a grant from MHCLG, we have been able to employ Pauline, our rough sleeper coordinator, who is able to manage services across the borough. We also, for the very first time, have our own outreach team provided by St Mungo's, who work at Marsham Court across the road behind the YMCA. They are going out every night, trying to, using street link referrals, using information provided by councillors, by neighbourhood officers, by the team in Clyde's Directorate, by the police, and by local residents, putting forward evidence that I have seen somebody rough sleeping here. And they are going out every night to try and find them. I've been with them. The work that they do and the commitment that they show is absolutely amazing. We also, for the first time, have 15 assessment beds within the YMCA, which we are able to use as short-term accommodation for up to 4 months for those people that we do find on the streets who are suitable for that accommodation. There is an assessment process that they go through. There is a commitment to help with any drug or alcohol dependency issues. And a number of people who've already been through that process have already moved on to longer-term, more suitable accommodation. And that's a fantastic success in this day and age. We also have a private sector move-on fund, which helps people at the end of that process with the assessment beds, meaning that we can help people pay rent in advance, we can help former rough sleepers pay deposits for accommodation in the private rented sector. Okay, so the impact of these interventions over the last 6 months has meant, we feel, that there are fewer people sleeping rough on our streets, and that is to be applauded, I think. Okay, now you may have seen, I know that you avidly follow me on Twitter, all of you. You may have seen that the GLA is now responsible for SWEP, the Severe Weather Emergency Protocol, and you will all have noticed that the weather today is dramatically colder than it has been over the preceding weeks. Okay, so for tonight, the Mayor has called the SWEP for the first time this winter, which means that all emergency shelters will be open and that anyone sleeping rough on the streets of Waltham Forest or across London who wants to access an emergency hostel bed will be accommodated. So I'm urging you. So I know that you have your eyes and ears on the streets, and I know that you are in touch with what's happening in your ward. If you see someone who you suspect is sleeping rough, then please, please make a street link referral. And there are many different ways that you can do that. You can connect with Street Link via the app, which is available via Apple or Android. You can use Tell Streetlink on Twitter. You can use the streetlink.org.uk website, or old-fashionedly, you can even phone them on 0300 500 0914. It's a vitally important service that they offer, and it's incredibly important that if we see rough sleepers, that we connect people to services that are available to help. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Now we move on to public statements, item 5. I'm afraid now that the meeting has begun, we can't discuss this anymore. Sorry. There is a health and safety limit of 20 people in the gallery as well. Okay. We have 4 people registered to speak, as on the order paper. Each speaker has 3 minutes. The first speaker wishes to address the Council on disabled parking and CCTV. Sir, will you please stop interrupting the meeting? If you continue, I will have to ask you to leave the meeting. Please abide by this warning.
This is supposed to be a democratic meeting.
We have 4 people registered to speak.
You're not going to let it continue whilst there's people outside who haven't been allowed in. Wait. Oi, what? No. What? This is disgraceful.
You are continuing to interrupt the meeting. I have given you a warning not to disrupt this meeting. This is a final warning. If you interrupt again, I will order you to leave the meeting.
Who do you people think you are? You're just managing this situation because you don't want people in here to see the debate. It's disgraceful.
Okay, next time it will be done. Yes? Okay.
It's supposed to be democracy, isn't it?
The first...
Shut up.
Excuse me, Councillor Best. Councillor Best. Councillor Best, can you please calm down? Let us continue with the meeting. I call on Gail Penfold to speak. Ms. Penfold, if you would like to come forward.
Madam Mayor, councillors and officers, thank you for allowing me to speak. Can you all hear me? Thank you. If you can't, you have this on your app. 3 minutes is not enough time to present more than one request properly. So the speech is on your app, accompanied by some notes. Tonight, I'm speaking on disability issues and CCTV. No one knows if or when they will become disabled, but it makes a huge difference to quality of life and the ability to do many things that people take for granted. A number of residents and people within disabilities in Waltham Forest has and continues to increase. Please, can Waltham Forest ensure every new development has some marked disabled bays for both residents and visitors? Sadly, many people today park illegally in marked bays. This is disability discrimination and detrimentally impacts on people with disabilities. Please, can Waltham Forest make all disabled bays enforceable and increase the number of marked disabled bays on the street and in car parks? Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, I need a second. Finally, but most importantly, I stood here over 15 years ago in 2003 following a brutal rape requesting CCTV. Tonight is my 4th time bringing this to full council. This is unfair on local residents who are not and do not feel safe, are regularly subject to crime, antisocial behaviour, inconvenience, financial loss, and are fed up being victims. Would you mind?
I'm going to continue, if that's okay, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So 360-degree cameras that can zoom in and are watched 24/7 are needed and are long overdue. The areas of Empress Avenue, Grove Park Avenue and Cavendish Path are extremely vulnerable and criminal activity levels unacceptable. As one example, just over a week ago, a local resident who also happens to be a London Borough of Waltham Forest employee was violently attacked and mugged in the afternoon of 5:30 p.m. In the last 15 years, the London Borough of Waltham Forest have had thousands of pounds in Section 106 monies, etc., yet none of it has been spent on our repeated requests. It is unacceptable that every time we get near to this happening, suddenly we're back to square one again.
Excuse me, Councillor, could you wind up, please, fairly soon? Thank you.
Local residents are entitled to feel safe and enjoy quality of life. There are links in place, so implementation is not as expensive as having a completely new system. These cameras are needed. It is doable, so for local residents and visitors, please do it and do it soon. Thank you for your time on behalf of GAL.
Thank you, Mrs. Penfold. Councillor Lokes, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Gail, for raising those two issues. Sadly, the second one once again. Certainly on the first one, Gail, hopefully you will be aware that this administration made a decision when it came back into power in May that we would begin the process of turning some 2,000 all of our disabled bays, 2,000 of them, into properly enforceable bays. We've started that process on recently introduced controlled parking zones. It's easier to do them in controlled parking zones first. And as we move through the borough, we'll be moving into changing them from complementary disabled parking bays through to statutory enforced ones, CPZ by CPZ. Once all of our CPZs are done, we'll then move into those roads that aren't currently part of a controlled parking zone. So on that one, you should see some progress. We expect the programme to take around about 18 months to complete because of the nature of what we have to do with regard to traffic management orders and such like. So hopefully you'll be pleased by that. With regard to the CCTV cameras, I shall pick that up with my colleague Arsen Khan, who leads on crime. And we'll also have some discussions with some of our officers about how we can take that kind of issue forward. Although we understand that there are a number of complications around simply putting CCTV cameras into residential areas only. Some people may want them. Some people, for various reasons, may not want them. So we just need to tread carefully. But we'll pick that conversation up. And what I'll do is I'll email you or write to you as most appropriate. If you forgive me, it will be in the new year, though, now. Thank you very much, Gail.
Thank you, Councillor Lokes. Councillor Siggers, there is no place in the order paper for you to speak at the moment. Apologies. The next three speakers wish to address the Council on the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and Councillor Lokes will respond to the three collectively afterwards. Oh, sorry, Councillor Khan will respond afterwards. I now call on Roland Rance to speak. Please come forward, Mr. Rance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors. Unfortunately, we live in a world in which murderous anti-Semitism and other manifestations of racism are on the rise. It's just a few weeks since an American fascist murdered 11 worshippers in a Pittsburgh synagogue. Last month, I visited Auschwitz and Birkenau concentration camps. This was a sobering experience, making clear the dreadful end to which such racism can lead. While I was there, hundreds of thousands of Poles, including the President and members of the government, took part in a fascist-led parade through the streets of Warsaw. This is the background to anti-Semitic racism and violence. This is what we have to confront and defeat. And the constitutional change you're being asked to endorse today offers no insight or guidance towards this. The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism has been criticised by academics and leading authorities on anti-Semitism, by jurists, and by Jewish organisations. The former director of the Institute for Jewish Policy Research has described the document as so flawed it should be abandoned, not tinkered with. A leading QC has written that any public authority which sought to apply the IHRA document to prohibit or sanction certain descriptions of Israel or certain types of political campaigning in support of Palestine would be acting unlawfully and could be in breach of the 1998 Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights. Scores of Jewish organisations across the world issued a statement earlier this year urging government, municipalities, universities and other institutions to reject the IHRA definition and instead take effective measures to defeat white supremacist nationalist hate and violence and to end complicity in Israel's human rights violations. And Kenneth Stern, the man who originally wrote the document, has insisted that it was never intended to be used to limit free speech, and he has described its misuse in this manner as McCarthyite. This document is divisive at a time when we need to be united. Here in Waltham Forest, we provided a shining example of how a united community can defeat fascists and protect the rights and security of minorities. 6 years ago, we came together to block and ridicule the English Defence League, who wished to march through our streets and spread their message of racism and hate. Anti-fascists across the world, from Poland to the USA, from Brazil to Britain, are coming together to challenge fascism and anti-Semitism. It's quite disgraceful that this council has permitted Ambrosine Shitrit, a supporter of the EDL and Tommy Robinson, to address this meeting. Today's proposal, far from contributing to this struggle, is a complete diversion. Rather than blocking anti-Semitic racism, it's an attempt to police speech on Israel and Palestine, and potentially to penalise councils, council workers and residents of the borough from exercising their right to oppose Israel and its practices. I urge you to reject the proposal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rance. I now invite Steve Wright to speak. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Wright.
Mr. White. Right, yeah. I wish to speak against this because I think the IHRA definition and the examples that are the worked examples have huge problems. Bad policy has unintended consequences, and the unintended consequences may well be to cause a perception of unfairness in society and cause an increase in anti-Semitism. A far better definition is this one: prejudice, hostility and discrimination against Jews as Jews, and the use of negative stereotypes of Jews, because it is clear and it is not about guessing the intention behind the words. The problem with the so-called hate speech is who decides what is hate and what people intend in their speech. The worked examples, I believe, are unfit for purpose, as do others, include references about Israel. If it is claimed that Israel was behaving in similar ways to dreadful regimes in the past against its Palestinian population, this can be interpreted as anti-Semitic. The unintended consequences of the IHRA definition as policy adopted into codes of conduct for all council employees is to reduce free speech. Criticism of Israel can be interpreted as anti-Semitic because it is the homeland for all Jews, even though most don't live there or want to live there, and consequently allegedly held dear by all Jews. Any criticism can mean that the criticism is reported and the person who made the comments can be investigated and lose their job. This happened to Stan Keeble, who worked for Hammersmith and Fulham Council, who adopted this IHRA definition into their codes of conduct when he was secretly recorded at a demonstration by a supporter of the Israeli state. This is an attack on free speech, and his attack is, and this attack is intended by adopting this definition to, I believe, to keep pro-Palestinian supporters shocked by the actions of Israeli state from speaking out. Another unintended consequence of widely adopting the IHRA definition into codes of conduct is that it could increase anti-Semitism. Muslims suffer far more racism than Jews at the current time, with a growing right wing focusing almost exclusively upon them, but one group appears to be favoured above them in the current political climate. Injustice of this kind will lead to resentment if the much bigger issue is ignored and unequal focus is applied to critics of the Israeli state. The IHRA definition will mean more and more focus on the minutiae of reported conversations until criticising the Israeli state in any way will be perceived as anti-Semitic. It will be like the life of Brian Jehovah's sketch, where the priest, even mentioning the word to stop others mentioning it, gets stoned.
Can you wind up, please?
Yes. Perceived inequality of perceived and real racism could lead to blasphemy laws extending an equivalent IHRA definitions for every religious and non-religious group. The result: more inequality, more division, less free speech, more injustice. Please reject this definition.
Thank you, Mr. White. Our final speaker is Ambrosine Chetrit. Please come forward, Ms. Chetrit. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ambrosine Chetrit and I run Eye on Anti-Semitism along with Campaign for Truth. Anti-Semitism is as bad in the UK and Europe as it was in the 30s. Across the UK, councils are being badgered by anti-Semitic political activists to boycott the IHR definition on the basis that it's okay to boycott and any question the existence of the Jewish state that is not anti-Jewish nor indeed anti-Semitic. But that's wrong. And it's wrong because that excuse is used as a smokescreen to camouflage their anti-Semitism. For example, the supporters of the Boycott Israel movements constantly use anti-Jewish tropes, as did over 50 Labour Party MPs, councillors and members like Naz Shah MP, who posted ideological tropes about Israel, which included anti-Semitism. The definition of anti-Semitism was agreed by the HMDT to be used as a safeguard to prevent a recurrence of the Holocaust, in which 1/3 of world Jewry was exterminated and the evidence burned in the ovens of Europe, their ashes fertilizing the forests that are a smokescreen for that vileness. A recent survey of over 16,000 people across Europe, reflecting the high Jew hatred in modern times, shows that anti-Semitism has become so normalized that Jews are leaving in droves. It underscores the fears of Jews across the UK who feel threatened at each time a council agrees to abide by the propaganda fed by the BDS activists, who are largely associated with organisations like the Workers' Revolutionary Party, PSC, etc., found at demonstrations across the UK where protesting against the existence of the Jewish state is commonplace. One commonly accepted definition of anti-Semitism includes precisely the holding of Israel, the Jewish state, to standards that are not applied to any other countries, and local councils represent all citizens, Jews included, and it is essential that they in general, and Waltham Forest in particular, heed their duty of care to all citizens by accepting this safeguard definition to regulate any possible situation in which Jews again face extermination through anti-Semitism. The findings of the EU survey, I can give you a link if you wish to read, makes for a sobering read. They underscore that anti-Semitism remains pervasive across the EU, the UK included, and has in many ways become disturbingly normalised. And the important information provided can support policymakers in stepping up their efforts to ensure the safety and dignity of all the Jewish people in the Waltham Forest Borough. I implore you to accept the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism.
Thank you, Ms. Chetrit, and thank you to all our speakers. Councillor Lokes, would you... sorry. Please accept my apologies. Councillor Khan, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam, I'd like to start by thanking the speakers who've taken time out this evening to come and address this full council meeting. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, not just across the continent, not just across the UK, but also, sadly, in Waltham Forest. And when you're going to go about tackling a problem, you need to define it properly. The IHRA definition is the most widely accepted definition. We would not be an outlier if we were to accept this definition. This definition is accepted by the Labour Party, by the Conservative Party, by all mainstream parties. It's accepted and adopted by councils right across this country, over 150 councils, the GLA and 26 London councils. Within Waltham Forest, we have a proud history of tackling racism, anti-Semitism is very much a form of racism. And that is why I'll be proposing that we accept the IHRA definition. Just in response to Roland's point, which is an important point around freedom of speech and expression, the advice we've had from legal officers at the authority, and I'll just read to you verbatim, adopting the IHRA definition does not interfere with an officer's right to express views about the policies of the State of Israel or in support of the people of Palestine, as long as those views are not anti-Semitic. That is the advice we've had from legal officers at this council. So, Madam Mayor, I'll propose that we accept the IHRA definition of Northern Forest. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. That concludes this item, and as we agreed earlier, we will now move straight to item 15. Councillor Lokes.
Can I formally move, Madam Mayor, that Waltham Forest Council adopts the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism as in the Green Book? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lokes. I now call upon Councillor Alan Siggers to second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wholeheartedly, formally second this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Siggers. Are there any amendments? No. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as set out on the order paper. Those in favour of the motion as set out on the order paper, please raise your hands. Okay. Those opposed, please raise your hands. Those abstaining? That motion is carried. Excuse me, you are now interrupting the meeting. I have given you warnings before not to disrupt this meeting. This is a final warning. You are ordered to leave the meeting. I'm going to adjourn this meeting until the protesters have been taken from the chamber. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Please be seated. This meeting is reconvened. Councillor Lokes would like to speak.
Thank you. Just to put on record, Madam Mayor, my thanks to yourself for the way that you conducted that part of business, and to Martin, to you and all your officers for the way that you have got us back into this chamber so swiftly. Thank you very much.
Councillor Siggers, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to echo and wholeheartedly support the comments made by my colleague, Clyde. Thank you very much, Clyde. And thank you to the officers.
The meeting is now reconvened and we are at item 6. Members' questions. We received 3 written questions which are set out at pages 9 to 12 of your order paper. The first question is from Councillor Best to the Leader of the Council. We will take the response as read. Councillor Best, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it would be unfair to ask too in-depth a question, given that the Council Leader is not here, but just to thank her for her response and ask if anyone in her place wanted to add anything on there, because I think it is important members know this in case they haven't seen it, and to also ask how we as members will be fed back to on the on how on the progress of these measures and steps.
Thank you. Councillor Lokes, are you going to reply? Thank you.
I think it would be really, really good, Madam Mayor, if my colleague, Councillor Nahid Asgar, fed back on today's event and how we intend to move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Asgar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Best, for your question. We had the Red Box launch earlier today at 5 o'clock, in which 20 schools and 1 college took part. So we've had a great response in the short space of time that officers have got the project rolling. Next steps after today's launch include developing publicity for an internal council launch and campaign, which will be targeted at staff and senior management. There will be a lunch and learn session for staff in early January to encourage them and inform them about the role that they can play as part of volunteers in this campaign. And in January, we will be having another event which will be around looking at how we encourage more volunteers and coordinators to keep this scheme sustainable. And in March 2019, we will review the progress of the schools that have been taking part in the scheme, coverage in priority neighbourhoods, young health champions, volunteer networks in place, and the level of donations. In terms of the events, we will keep you updated via member circular. If you have any further questions, please do email me. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question is from Councillor Moss to the Leader of the Council. We will take the response as read. Councillor Moss, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for allowing me to bring this back to the meeting. I note that the total paid to OMG Media exceeds £50,000 in the financial year, and all members here will know that were we to receive £100 a month donations to our political campaigning, that would trigger a requirement to report to the Electoral Commission. My question is about how many contracts under £10,000 have to be awarded to the same company for those commissioning those contracts to be required to get competing quotes. And while I'm at it, how many members opposites received donations towards their election expenses from OMG Media Limited? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Lokes, are you going to respond?
I need to write back to Councillor Moss on those answers.
Thank you.
Thank you. The third question is from Councillor Siggers to the Deputy Leader. We will take the response as read. Councillor Siggers, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do. A few, if that's all right. At the report that went to Cabinet, at paragraph 3.6, it states that it is proposed that permanent traffic management orders be made under certain sections of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984. Could I ask the Deputy Leader to provide me with copies of the of those sections of the Act identified in that report, please?
Thank you,
I've actually a number of questions, if that's permissible.
You strictly are permitted one supplementary question.
Oh.
Please continue, Councillor Siggers.
Again, in the report, thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Clyde. Must be Christmas. In the report, it states that at 7.11, the cost of advertising and implementing the charges, which you have already answered. Could you also tell me how you, or in what way the Cabinet considered what happens in CPZs, which at the moment motorcycles can park freely in? If I take my car to see my friends in Walthamstow, and yes, I do have friends in Walthamstow, I get given a little residence permit which I can scratch off and place in the windscreen of my car. Because on my motorcycle at the moment I don't have to pay. So can you please explain how the Cabinet considered what would happen to motorcycles in CPZs from outside the area? I think actually yeah, I think that will do me. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Siggers. Councillor Lux, will you respond, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your questions, Alan, as ever, very thoughtful. On the sections of the report, your first question, I'll have to come back to you on the details of that if you'll give me that leeway. But I will respond quicker than I did with one of your colleagues who asked me a question last time, and I only got back to her the other day. So I will do that a lot more swiftly than previous. On the second part of your question around how...
Councillor Siggers, excuse me. Can you switch your light off? Thank you.
On the second question around how motorbikes will be able to do their visitor permits, because it's, you know, scratch card if you're in a car, and that obviously goes on the dashboard, etc., etc. Actually, increasingly in CPZs, it's virtual permits that are deployed. So the person that you're visiting in Walthamstow will simply make the phone call and book your registration in, and that's literally all that needs to happen. So actually, we increasingly don't need scratch cards in the way that we once did. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 7, notice of motion. I would now like to invite Councillor Siggers to move the motion on lifting the housing cap. This is on page 3 of your order paper. You have 5 minutes to speak, Councillor Siggers.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I don't actually have to say very much to this because it pretty much does what it says on the tin. This was an excellent piece of legislation and long overdue, in my view. I think I'm right in saying Kevin actually wrote to the Minister for Housing some time ago requesting this very thing. So I think it was I think it's a good piece of legislation, possibly the most significant piece of housing legislation any government has brought in for quite some considerable time. So you can imagine my surprise, Madam Mayor, when I saw the Labour amendment. Because what this motion was asking in its unfiddled with form was for us to do something for someone, to the Chief Executive in this case, to have a report prepared which would come back to us so we would understand that the administration understood how it was to access this money, how it was to use this money, how it would benefit the people of this borough who are currently on a waiting list for social rented housing. Not affordable housing, because we all know that's a fudge. What astonish me is that not only is the Labour Party not prepared to do that, in their amendment, they actually don't want to do anything at all. They call upon the government. Well, that's going to make a world of difference, isn't it? You can imagine all the people on our housing list going, yay, we've called upon the government. And the government going, oh, we're in trouble here. The Labour group in Waltham Forest have called upon us. To do what? Nothing. So, I can't understand how this can even be classed as an amendment. I'm pretty sure it's not under the Constitution, because the amendment negates the motion, which is we're not supposed to do. The amendment does not speak to the motion, which we're not supposed to do. So instead of actually doing something and giving us information, you've chosen not to do that. I'd have been happier if you'd have just said, look, we don't know the answer. We haven't got a clue. That would have been fine. We'd have accepted that. Because there was no time limit in this. We didn't say we wanted the report back within 6 months, 3 months, a year. All we asked for is for you to actually tell us how you are going to access this huge pile of cash. And instead, what you've got is a self-congratulatory pile of nothingness. And we're supposed to say, you know, thank you for Sadiq Khan, that he's actually deigned to give us some of the, 1.74 billion? He's been given the largest single housing settlement ever given to a mayor of London by any government. And we're supposed to thank him for that. Well, not shooting very high. Madam Mayor, people of this council, what is so bad about actually doing something? Actually trying to get from here to there?
Councillor Siggers, you have 30 seconds remaining to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Instead of just being desperate to pat yourselves on the back, I support this motion. You should support this motion unamended, because it asks you to do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Siggers. I would now like to invite Councillor Moss to second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You all know I like my statistics. Did you know that 359,000 homes were granted planning consent in the year to September 2018? That's up by 200,000 compared with 2009, and more than 100,000 compared with 2007. In 2017, 195,000 new homes were completed. That's up by almost 60,000 compared with 2010, and higher than all but 4 years when Labour were in government. When Labour were in government, just 6,330 council homes, new council homes, were built. That's the total for 13 years. In the last 2 years, we beat that. And in fact, in the last 8 years, since 2010, over 19,000 new council homes have been built. But you know what? That's not good enough. So we want to do more, and we want to help councils to do more. Now, when I started reading your amendment, I actually quite liked it. You praise the Conservative government for lifting the debt cap. You praise the Conservative government for giving the Mayor of London that record settlement, of which he is giving us a little bit. You welcome changes made by the Conservative government to right-to-buy policy, probably coming in. Kevin and I wrote that letter. Well, Kevin wrote it. He asked for 100%. I said go for 50, but he went for 100. We're getting 50, Kevin. Who was right? And you welcome the rent settlement, which affordable housing providers are saying, great, thank you very much, that gives us the stability we need and the confidence to invest. But then you went and ruined it. You had to have a moan. You had to say to the government, we want more. Please, sir, can I have some more? Can't remember who said that. Anyway. And actually, I need to mention, Madam Mayor, Councillor Mitchell, at the beginning of the meeting when she made her announcement, thanking the Conservative government for the support they've given this council, helping us to reduce homelessness. We asked for the benefit of every councillor, for every member, so that we can help our residents understand what we're doing to help them get a decent home. We asked, as Councillor Siggers said, for the council to come back and tell us what we were going to do with these newfound freedoms. And I hark back to just shortly after I was elected when our head of housing, Ken Jones, said, you know what, right to buy, liberation of the housing revenue account and the Localism Act is an absolute game changer for the building of new council homes. We have not really grasped that, but there are more than 19,000 new homes out there built by our council and others which are giving people a decent home, and we want this council to do more, do it faster and do it better. So we're going to vote against your amendment because it lets the council off the hook. It lets you off the hook. And it lets us off the hook when residents come to us and say, what are you doing? Because we can say, well, the government's lifting the debt cap, the government's given the Mayor the biggest ever financial settlement for the building of new affordable homes. We've given all the affordable housing prizes a 5-year rent settlement, and we're helping with homelessness. But we can't say what this council is doing. So if you've got some confidence in yourself and some confidence in the officers, why don't you stand up and withdraw your amendment? Accept ours and let our officers go away and tell us how they're going to use these wonderful gifts that they've been given by the Conservative government.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. There is an amendment. Councillor Miller, would you like to propose the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, Councillor Siggers has asked us to do something. My answer is very, very simple. We are doing something. We're building homes and we are building council homes. I'm going to speak against the Conservative motion, not because I don't welcome the government's, albeit reluctant, recognition that councils have an active and important role to play in building council houses, nor because I don't welcome the additional money that's been made available to us. I do. I'm speaking against this motion and speaking in favour of a Labour amendment because this motion fails to do two very important things. Firstly, it doesn't recognise the work that is already being done and has been done to build affordable homes and council homes in particular in this borough. And secondly, it overstates the ability of these measures to actually meet our housing need. Now, let me be absolutely clear to this chamber. The absolute priority of this administration is the provision of homes and housing for our people and the building of new council homes. As a council, we have a record to be proud of when it comes to building affordable homes. Between 2013 and 2016, 47% of all new homes built in this borough were affordable. That was the highest rate in London. As a council, we've also developed a robust and resilient and clear set of policies to ensure that we build the homes our people need. And I want to say unequivocally to this chamber what it is that we intend to achieve. Our target is that on new housing developments, 50% of all homes should be affordable. We've introduced new viability assessments and new review process to ensure that the planning and build processes deliver the greatest number of affordable homes. These measures alone have led to increases in the number of affordable homes on Leabridge Road development and also elsewhere, including in the Black Horse Road area. Our commitment on council-owned land is that at least 50% of all homes we build will be affordable. And this means that over the next few years, we will build over 1,050 new affordable homes across our key sites. That is a hell of a policy proposition and a hell of an achievement. Let me give you an example. Across our 3 Lea Bridge station sites, we will build 300 new homes. 50% of those will be affordable, 90% will be at social rent, and 60% will be at intermediate level.
Councillor Miller, you have 30 seconds
Well,
left.
I will do my best to wrap up as quickly as possible. I thought I had 5 minutes, Madam Mayor. Going forward, we have one of the most ambitious council house building programmes in London, 1,400 council homes for which construction should start by 2022. That will be 400 built directly by us and 1,000 built by our development company, 60 Bricks. Now, to address these measures, we're already borrowing an additional £32 million under the Council Homes for London programme.
Councillor Miller, I do apologise. You do have a 5-minute slot, so you have more time than I told you.
In which case, I'll try to rebuild the ruins of my beautifully timed speech. So let's turn, in the interest of brevity and everyone's dignity, let's turn to the measures at hand. So we are already borrowing an additional £32 million under the Mayor's Council House for Londoners programme. That is probably close to the additional headway that we as a borough can afford. We do not know exactly the conditions under which we will be able to borrow additionally under the government's proposals, but we suspect that we will be bound by prudential borrowing rules. That means there isn't much more that we can borrow. We can only borrow what we can afford, we can only borrow safely, and we can only borrow responsibly. In terms of right to buy receipts, that's absolutely welcome. But we do not know yet how we will be able to spend that money. Government has not made that clear. What I can promise you all is that we will ensure that we use every penny of the money that is being made available to us to build new council homes where our people need them most. Because that is what we do as a council. We enable new council homes, we build new council homes, and we use the resources available to us to maximum effect. Now, at the start of this, I said that I welcomed some of the measures that have been brought in. And although I've spoken against the Conservative motion, I recognise that the motion was set out to welcome what are broadly useful measures. And for that, I do give you my thanks. And in that spirit, I'm very happy to provide members with a full and written briefing on the exact detail of our Council House building programme, how that money will be spent, how we anticipate it can be spent now, and when the full detail is available, how it will be spent. And on that note, and at 5 seconds past 5 minutes, Madam Mayor, I will wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller, and I do apologise for my incorrect interruption. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to second the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay. I'll try to be brief. Like my colleague, I'm afraid I am going to speak against the Conservative motion and in favour of the Labour amendment. I think it is important to recognise the brilliant work being done by our housing and our regeneration teams to maximise the amount of affordable housing, including that for social rent, across the borough. And while doing this, we also need to recognise that the measures introduced by the current government are not a panacea and will not solve the housing crisis on either a local or national level. Although a lot of the council's attention is rightly focused on building new properties, including that affordable housing, that we also need to focus on the properties that we already have and improving the life chances of the people who live in them. So as a council, we do welcome the 5-year rent deal from April 2020-2021, that of CPI plus 1% per year following years of depleted revenue. But again, it is important to recognise the limitations of this measure. As colleagues will know, all social landlords have been subject to a rent reduction levy since 2016-17, and the corresponding fall in our rental outcome has had an impact on the amount of money available to invest in our existing housing stock. The Council's medium-term financial forecast includes the assumption of CPI plus 1% rent increases from 2021 onwards. The Council has assumed a CPI increase of 2% annually over this period, and this results in an additional rent income of about 1.5 million per year. The cumulative increase over the forecast period of 4 years from the 1st of April 2020 is £15.9 million. However, our rental income has fallen by 27 million, and this increase, although welcome, does not put us back in the position that we were once in. Monies received as rent from our tenants contribute to the repair and maintenance of existing housing stock. Members will be pleased to know that we are anticipating, following the Grenfell tragedy, the final report from the review chaired by Dame Judith Hackett. We anticipate this will introduce new standards for social landlords for front entrance doors to withstand fire, the installation of sprinkler systems and other safety measures. Part of the additional capital that we are able to borrow, outlined by my colleague, following the current Prime Minister's announcement of the removal of the HRA borrowing cap, has been set aside in anticipation of a new Decent Home standards. Obviously, if a standard is introduced, we will be bringing all of our properties to meet that new standard. However, we are not confident, and history tells us that there will be insufficient central government funding for us to do this. However, this council is committed to providing a high standard of accommodation across all our properties. This is why we are committed to installing sprinkler systems in all our high-rise blocks where needed, our sheltered accommodation and our wooden frame construction properties. This is why we are committed to a rolling programme of installing new kitchens and bathrooms, and why we are committed to replacing lifts in our high-rise blocks where this hasn't already been done. This Labour Council is committed to ensuring that all our residents have a decent roof over their heads, and these are some of the ways we are showing that commitment to our council tenants. So, Madam Mayor, I formally second the motion, and I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. We now have time for a debate on the amendment. And as far as I'm aware, we have 2 speakers. Okay, 3 speakers. Can we have Joe Lacey-Holland, first of all?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's an honour to be able to speak on behalf of the residents of William Morris Ward in this debate tonight. A ward that is undergoing significant change as the council and its partners seek to meet the booming need for housing across all tenure types, from first-time buyers like myself to those who require social housing. We've already heard about the ambitious house building plans for the borough, including the vitally important target of achieving 50% affordable housing across developments. However, we must recognise that these plans have been brought forward by this Labour administration in spite and not because of government policy, which, as so eloquently expressed by the Leader of the Opposition, has sought to constrain the right and proper role of local authorities in the supply of housing. We, in the Labour Party, have been lobbying for this borrowing cap to be lifted for some considerable time, and it is welcome that common sense has finally prevailed. However, the reason I support these amendments is that they recognise the reality that lifting the borrowing cap is not a silver bullet solution. It would be inaccurate to suggest that increased local borrowing alone could deliver the quantum of housing supply needed to meet demand. The housing crisis is a national crisis impacting on communities the length and breadth of this country. And without decisive action by government, there is simply not the financial firepower available to enable councils to play their fullest role. If the government truly believed in the words of its own Lord Porter, then they would reverse the budget cuts that have slashed this council's funding by 63% since 2010. I also welcome these amendments because they recognise that house building is not something that happens in isolation, but is inextricably linked to proper infrastructure development. We must heed the lessons of the past, when bad urban design often delivered poor quality homes in isolated socio-economic ghettos. Creating cohesive and sustainable communities requires livable neighbourhoods with the infrastructure that allows them to thrive. The council has achieved some notable success in this area. For example, It is committed to having its proposals independently assessed by the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment. It has worked to deliver mixed tenure and mixed-use developments with proper amenities. And it is invested in top-quality public realm and parks where cycling and walking is encouraged, an absolute necessity for healthy urban living in the 21st century.
you have about 30 seconds left to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. But all of this has been done thanks to local effort and innovation. Much more is required at a national level. The government, whoever it may be next year, must take the chance of providing a comprehensive funding settlement that fully enables local authorities to play their role in the urgent job of rebuilding the social and capital infrastructure of Britain. I hereby support the amended motion.
Councillor Limbaji, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to follow by Joe and Simon and Louise. On reading the motion, I thought, yes, success at last. Don't doubt the power of this Labour group, John, to actually change government policy. But like all policy making, there's a hidden value to it. I had to sit with my fellow Labour cabinet members for housing, with fixed grins on our faces, sipping bad cold tea, talking to not one, but 2 Tory housing ministers, slowly and patiently explaining why the borrowing cap is bad. It means you can't build houses. Slowly, the penny did drop. And again, second time we had to sit and talk very slowly and patiently why the rules around right to buy do not help house building. 30% of the money you've received can only be spent on a new house, and you can't mix that with GLA grant funding, so you don't build homes and councils have to send the money back. Yes, you're right, we wanted 100%, so we think every council should be able to retain and receive and retain the 100% of the right to buy receipts and spend them wholly on building new homes, wholly mixed with GLA grant funding. It's common sense, and I hope one day the new housing minister, hopefully a Labour housing minister, will actually make that change, that much needed change. But Madam Mayor, it's 50%. I have to sort of say thank you very much, 50%. And it reminds me, this Tory government, it's like a stop clock. A stop clock tells the right time twice a day. That's it. And so I don't want to be rude about the Tory government at all. But and it's being called a stop clock is probably not a bad thing compared to being called a zombie government. I don't know. But let's face it. Look at the context of the decimation of housing policy over the last 4 years. The minus 1% cap on rents decimated, took £27 million out of this council's budget to build council homes. It decimated other councils as well, and that had a huge, profound negative effect on what happened. And also look at the context of actually the lack of funding in this council. £100 million.
Councillor Limbaji, you have 30 seconds left to speak.
I'll finish. £100 million every year has been taken out, so £800 million. So yes, we do welcome some of the incremental steps. But frankly, we need a lot more government funding and a lot more resolution by this government to support housing. And it's the ingenuity and the skill and the sheer grit of our housing team and our housing members to actually push forward. That is why we're working the best for our Waltham Forest residents, and we will deliver for them despite this government.
Thank you, Councillor Limbaji. Councillor Halibi, you would like to speak. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to speak against the amended motion. You make an amendment to a good motion and you speak utter rubbish. Councillor Miller, what a load of rubbish. How many residents have you in Waltham Forest in the last 5 years housed? You congratulate yourselves on building homes. Great. Fantastic, but how many residents of Waltham Forest were actually housed? Perhaps you can let us know later on. Furthermore, how many of those properties were social housing? Not many. And how many of them were really affordable properties? Not many. Our residents would really like to see social housing, real affordable housing, really meaning affordable. You've been building high-value properties and importing population from other wealthy boroughs. So why are we building in Milford Forest if it's not going to home and house our own population? Madam Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Halibi. Councillor O'Dea, you would like to speak.
Madam Mayor, thank you for allowing me to speak. I find it completely hypocritical to listen to my colleagues on the other side of the chamber talking about social housing. It was a Conservative government who brought in the right to buy, diminishing social housing stock. All right? I would like you to go back to your motion and maybe include something about to end the right to buy, and go back to your government and suggest that. But maybe then we can retain some more social housing. I don't really like the idea of being able to borrow money if we are able to lift the cap to then offer that social housing back to the private market. I would like to see that social housing stay within the council. So I would like you to go back to your government and ask them to end the right to buy.
Thank you, Councillor O'Dea. Councillor Hempstead, you would like to speak.
I would, thank you. Just to say, really, I can understand why lots of members of the public feel so disillusioned with politics. I'm a local councillor and I'm starting to feel very disillusioned in politics, and particularly with this council chamber. I feel that the Labour group in this chamber have got so blinded by politics that you've completely forgotten why you're actually meant to be here. Our motion tonight is asking for a report. It's not asking you to necessarily agree with us or even agree with this government policy. It's asking for you to investigate it, a great policy that's come from central government. But you're so blinded by your own politics, you can't see that. All you want to do is ramble on about Labour. It's all you want to do. This is about our residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hempstead. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Siggers, you have a right of reply on the amendment, up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try to be brief, because wow. Okay. Let's try and deal with this as quickly as I can. Simon, loads of we will, we intend to, maybe we will, maybe we won't. That was the point of our motion. Tell us what. Tell us what you're going to do. Yes, and you did, and I thank you for that. Acknowledged. But so why bother to amend it? What was the point? You're going to do it anyway. Louise, really? Maths? The HRA budget is in surplus, right? It's not short money. I mean, seriously. I know, it's maths, so. Where are we? Okay, so, municipal year. Right, we've had a great deal about what we have done. What we have done. This is coming from this side. In the municipal year, ending in May this year, 2018, of all the consents in major projects, only 18% of properties were affordable. We did that, or rather, let's be more accurate, failed to do that. Of that 18%, 78% were shared ownership. What did that do to our housing list? What kind of dent did that put in it? Zero. Oh, and by the way, of the percentage, of the affordable percentage, the major chunk of that, I think it was about just over 50% of that, was affordable housing, affordable rented, that will only be affordable rented for 10 years. Then it goes back to Legal and General so they can put it on the market. Bang up job, guys. Well done. Councillor Lacey Holland. why aren't we building more? Why aren't we building more social rented? I don't know. Ask your lot. They're the ones that do it. Shared ownership does nothing. It's a sop. When I speak to my clients and they go, huh,
Councillor Siggers, you have 30 seconds left to speak.
What are we going to do about affordable? I said, don't worry about it. Do shared ownership. It doesn't cost you anything. And guess what? They do. Kevin, Jesus, why you've sat there and you've said, you know, you had to go to 2 Conservative housing ministers. Tell you what, when Labour were in power, why didn't you go and see them? Then maybe we wouldn't be in this position.
Councillor Siggers? Councillor Siggers, you have spoken for 3 minutes. Can you wind up very briefly,
absolutely.
please?
I've got one more point and I promise I'll shut up. Councillor O'Day, you know, I get that. You know, don't worry, the shine will wear off. Right to buy. Yes, the Conservatives brought it in. Personally, I think it was a good idea, badly executed. But Labour, Tony Blair, nothing. You didn't do a damn thing. You say, oh, we should repeal it. You were in power long enough.
Councillor Siggers, you have
it?
spoken well beyond your 3 minutes. Please stop now. Thank you very much. And can I also remind you that remarks are to be addressed through me as the chair of the meeting rather than directly to other members in the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you for the... Madam Mayor, I do apologise. No, you can tell I'm a little bit passionate. No disrespect was intended. I still think this is a great motion. I still think you should support it. I'm sitting down. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Let us now go to a vote. I would like to have a hands-up vote, please. All those in favour of the amendment. Thank you. All those against the amendment? Thank you. And are there any abstentions? Okay, that amendment is carried. So let's have a vote on the motion as it is now, please. Okay. All those in favour? The amended motion. The substantive motion as amended. Those in favour, thank you. Those against? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The motion as amended is carried. We're now at item 8. Local Council Tax Support Scheme. Okay, Council is asked to continue the Local Council Tax Support Scheme for working age residents unable to afford their council tax liability, as recommended by Cabinet. Councillor Lokes, will you move this scheme? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally move and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Grace Williams, will you second the recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? In that case, Councillor... Oh, sorry. In that case, I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as set out? Thank you. Against? Okay. Are there any abstentions? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. Item 9, Pioneering Employer. I call upon Councillor Lokes to move the recommendations as set out in the order paper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As hopefully everyone will know, earlier on in the year, in January, Waltham Forest became the first local authority and possibly, we still think we were, the first employer in the country to adopt the Smallest Things campaign, which meant that we were paying full pay to those members of staff who had premature babies for the duration that those premature babies were in hospital. That set us on a bit of a course to start thinking about how we can improve some of our family-friendly policies, in particular in the council. We then had the motion that Councillor Tim James moved earlier on, was it October, September time? And that kind of drew our attention to some other areas around how we support members of staff who are going through some particularly challenging times with caring responsibilities and duties, and caused us to reflect further on what we could do to support our staff during those times. Cabinet then considered a suite of improvements to terms and conditions of our staff a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very proud and pleased to be here this evening to be presenting this to full council, for full council to adopt, and actually very pleased that Tim was prepared to second this motion and this suite of improvements to our staff's terms and conditions also. Particularly, I draw attention to a number, though, which puts us at the forefront of progressive terms and conditions in local government and possibly across the HR world. We're increasing the numbers of weeks for paternity leave. We're introducing leave at full pay for up to 5 days per annum for any employee who is a foster carer or shared lives carer to enable participation in assessment reviews, training, etc. We just know how important foster carers are to helping us look after our most vulnerable children in this borough. So it's important that we can just give them that extra little bit of support. Particularly, I draw your attention to parental bereavement leave. Government is to introduce this in 2020, but we see no reason why we as a council, as an employer, cannot introduce this on the 1st of January 2019. Easily done, hopefully never to be used, but if it does need to be used, just a little bit of extra support for our staff that find themselves in such tragic circumstances. And finally, the one that I have great joy in bringing forward, our staff have a wealth of experience and skills and knowledge that could be fantastically deployed amongst the community and voluntary sector in the borough. So as a council, we're giving them 2 full paid days to contribute to building capacity, to contribute to making our community and voluntary sector in Waltham Forest amongst the best on offer in London and across the UK. And hopefully in the early part of next year, we'll be holding what I'm currently badging as a Freshers' Fair for all Waltham Forest-based charities and third sector organisations to come in and basically pitch themselves to our staff. If they're looking for accountants, if they're looking for someone to help clean up a brook or a park, whatever, to pitch themselves and to try and get those staff to utilise these 2 full days' pay to help improve the lives of Waltham Forest residents even further, but the place of Waltham Forest as well. And on that, Madam Mayor, I move. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Tim James to second the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And can I also extend my thanks to Councillor Oakes for inviting me to second this and to speak on this evening. Much appreciated. Just very conscious of a packed agenda and a lot of items on here tonight. I will keep this brief, so you won't be needing the 5-minute rule or your gavel this evening, Madam Mayor. As we already know, we all voted with cross-party support to put through Smallest Things, and that cross-party support and cooperation was extended so that we could try and introduce some support for our employees who also have caring duties. This shows that we are a forward-thinking, we are a caring and compassionate employer, and we welcome this report this evening. To be honest, when I first saw this report, it really went above and beyond my expectations. I was very pleased with some of the proposals that were outlined in here. I will mention just a few because Councillor Oakes has already gone through quite a few of them. But in particular, I was pleased to see that we are making real progress in being able to provide support to our employees who have carers' duties, and also how we'll be going about promoting that to make sure they're aware of what is on offer. I was particularly pleased to see the extension of leave to parents, especially acknowledging those who are foster carers and also shared lives. And I think it's absolutely the right thing to make sure that these rights are extended to members. I'd also like to note the importance of ensuring that fair treatment is extended to all of our employees, regardless of what their personal circumstances, when they're being considered for extra development and or promotion, for example. So, Madam Mayor, for these reasons that I've outlined, it gives me great pleasure to formally second.
Thank you, Councillor James. Are there any amendments? Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Okay, I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour, as set out on the order paper. Those against? Are there any abstentions? Okay, that is agreed. We now move to item 10, the budget review, fees and charges for 2019 to 2020. I call upon Councillor Lokes to move the recommendations for the excuse me. I've got the wrong text. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I call upon Councillor Lokes to recommend the fees and charges as on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally move and reserve my right to speak.
I call upon Councillor Grace Williams to second the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second and reserve my right to speak.
Are there any amendments? Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Councillor Moss. Okay. Councillor Seesunker, thank you.
Within yesterday's, we had scrutiny yesterday, and within that report, Traffic and Highways is set to make a surplus of 266k, having already found savings of 2 million. So you can imagine my surprise when I saw this report where residence permits are going up between 17 and 100%. Given that the majority of residents in this borough only own one car, I'd like to actually ask why this permit has gone up by 100%, because I think that's really unacceptable. You know, you're kind of penalising families and not, you know, not the people that own more than 4 vehicles. Secondly, sorry, I'm just reading my notes. Cars with high emissions have only gone up by 17%, but in the interest of being environmental, surely this should have gone up a lot higher. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Moss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I was being a gentleman and letting the ladies go first. Another thing that came up at budget scrutiny last night. You may note, if you've read the schedule, that the fees for pest control have disappeared from the schedule approved by this council. That is because pest control is now a service operated by our local authority trading company, Waltham Forest Services. I asked a question last night which was, who sets those charges? And I was told that it was the board of that company. The board of that company is made up of officers of the association, of the council, sorry. There is therefore no democratic oversight of the setting of those charges. This is something which this side of the chamber has raised before in respect of 60 Bricks, in respect of our property investment business, and in respect of other matters where we as members are not engaged, are not involved with the process with the business of the council. I raise it simply so that you are aware that once again something is being moved beyond our site. When we had an Almo, Asham Homes, there was a Liberal Democrat member on the board, and there was a Conservative member on the board, and there were Labour members on the board. I'm sure Keith remembers. That was a good principle to follow. It was a good principle of governance. It was a good form of oversight. I just urge the administration to take care as more and more services are delivered by a company which is not within the purview of this chamber to have oversight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Lokes, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, on the permit charges, we regularly, annually benchmark our charges against the rest of London, and you'll be pleased to know that we are still one of the cheapest boroughs when it comes to permit charges in London, certainly on the first vehicle, that is the case. Obviously, with households with more than one vehicle and with households with higher emission vehicles, they are charged more, and you will find actually in the schedule for London, actually they're towards the middle end of charges rather than the lower end of charges. I'll take on board the comments from Councillor Moss. However, I will add that Cabinet did sign off these fees and charges, so there is political oversight of these fees and charges. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And can we move to the vote, please?
Thank you. I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as set out on the order paper.
Madam Mayor, on behalf of the Conservative Group, I'd like to ask for a recorded vote on this motion.
Thank you. Thank you. We will have a recorded vote in that case. Let's use the electronic voting system. Okay. Whoa.
Through you, Madam Mayor, can I just remind members that we've already preloaded your voting cards. There's no need to, you don't need to insert anything. You'll probably recollect that to vote, it's simply plus is for, the 0 button is abstaining, and the minus button is against. So is everyone clear on what they need to do? Okay. Okay, I'll repeat that again. All you need to do when the Mayor calls for the vote, plus on the console is for, 0 is abstaining, the minus is against.
Thank you. Please cast your votes. $43. Okay, has everybody voted? That's probably about it. I'm going to close the vote now. The vote is now closed. That motion is carried. Item 11, the London Business Rates Pilot Pool. Okay. I call upon Councillor Simon Miller to move the recommendations on the London Business Rates Pool.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to formally move this and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Louise Mitchell to second this motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second and also reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Are there any amendments? Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Good. In that case, I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour of the motion as set out on the order paper? Those opposed? Those abstaining? That motion is agreed. Item 12, Gambling Act 2005, Statement of Principles. I call upon Councillor Lokes to move the recommendations on the Gambling Act 2005 Statement of Principles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally move and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Chris Robbins to second the motion.
Formally second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any amendments? Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Thank you. I will now put this motion to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? That motion is carried. Item 13, persistent evaders of payment of parking penalty charges, etc. I call upon Councillor Clyde Lokes to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. By the end of the evening, you'll be calling me Councillor Lokesy. Can I formally move and reserve my right to speak?
I now call upon Councillor Vicky Tevelde to second the recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second.
Thank you. Are there any amendments? Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Okay. Councillor Halibi and Councillor Best.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am going to support the Council's endeavours to recover monies from people who live outside the borough and who are evading the payment of penalty notice charges, whilst my residents in this borough are chased and forced to make such payments. What I'd like to really know, perhaps the councillor in charge of this may be able to answer it. My residents would be alarmed to know it's taken this council 10 years to consider to pursue persistent evaders who have evaded payment of penalty charge notices just because they live outside the borough. Furthermore, I think my residents will be also alarmed to find out or to learn that approximately 8% of the monies that are recovered are retained by the council and 92% are handed over to the enforcement company, NSL, unless somebody can tell us otherwise. It will also be interesting to find out how we are doing business with a company that fails to pay its taxes in the UK and has offshore companies and transfers money to the Cayman Islands. Madam Mayor, thank you. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Councillor Best.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and keep it brief because I know this probably isn't a scintillating topic for most, but I do think the Cabinet member does have a question to ask about why we are one of the last councils to be using this power. I mean, Tower Hamlets did it 3 years ago, and I think that says something if we're 3 years behind Tower Hamlets personally. The other question I think my colleague just raised then as well, I believe the last time looking at a different contracting model was in 2016. I believe that NSL have been given a contract until December 2019, and I do believe in the year ahead it is about time that we have a look again at that contract and the value for money we're getting. I know when you set up to do something like bring costs in-house, there's a fee that could be about £300,000 for year one, but then I think it's definitely something that's worth looking into when you look at the money that we are losing. And I don't think that's what residents want. I don't think residents want to pay for NSL to have, money in the Cayman Islands, as Nick just said. I think they want to pay under the knowing that the money is going back into the streets. And I think I raise that now because I think that's what this has kind of prompted for a lot of us to think about, the fact that if we are going to chase after these people, it doesn't actually make a difference for us. It's the right thing to do because people shouldn't be evading paying parking tickets. But instead of this meaning that there's going to be anything coming in to help this council pay for services, nothing. It doesn't matter. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do and people shouldn't be evading tickets. But it doesn't actually help us as a council to pay for any services because of the fact that we're in this contract.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Lokes, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you. On the first points raised by Nick, actually that isn't the percentage breakdown at all by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm not sure where you've got those figures from. This isn't just about being able to take people who live outside of the borough, though. To be able to enforce persistent evaders within the borough, you then have to catch them in contravention again. Actually, this will mean that we'll be able to pick up those residents of the borough who are also persistent evaders. So that's a quite crucial point to this. Actually, Emma, as far as we're aware, Waltham Forest is the first borough to enact a full suite of these powers in London. So, that's why we're going forward. And I was with my colleagues at London Council's Transport and Environment Committee only last week, and they were amazed that they themselves had not picked this up. So, once again, pioneering borough, Waltham Forest, utilising the powers that are available to really make a difference. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Those opposed? Those abstaining? That is agreed. Item 14, draft meetings programme for 2019 to 20. I call upon Councillor Steve Terry to move the recommendations.
I formally move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Marion Fitzgerald to second the recommendations.
Formally second, Madam Mayor.
Are there any amendments? Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Okay. Oh, sorry. I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. That motion is carried. We have already dealt with item 15, so we now move on to item 16, the special motion, Freedom of the Borough. I'd like to invite Councillor Karen Bellamy to introduce the item. You will have 5 minutes to speak, Karen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a pleasurable thing to do in the Chamber, actually, which makes a change. I had the honour to actually meet this lady with the leader a few weeks ago and spend some time talking to her. Some of you, in fact, probably all of you, will remember she went viral on social media after a horrible racist attack on a Ryanair plane. The thing that really struck me on looking at the footage as it was coming through is how dignified she was and how she dealt with it with grace and dignity. When I then subsequently met her, I understood why she was like that. She's a very calm, very eloquent and very elegant lady that we are very proud of. She is a shining example of how to respond to diversity and how to respond to attacks of racism on all levels. So we would like to offer her the freedom of the borough. She's a resident, she's been a resident for many decades. She worked in social care in the borough for 25 years and was in fact an employee of Waltham Forest for those 25 years. She is a lively character, and we, at the end of the meeting, offered to get her a cab to her friend's house, and she said, no, it's fine, I'll use the bus. And so we were enamoured at her courage, at, as I said, as her dignity, and the way she handled that whole episode. And I would like to put forward the motion that we give this lovely lady the freedom of the borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Councillor Alistair Strathern to second the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to wholeheartedly endorse my ward colleague's statements and proudly second this motion.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Waldron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to say in this chamber today that I'm very proud that we have taken this decision, and I'm glad that we're able to support our residents in her time of need and to show solidarity as a council and as a borough. And I'd just like to say that I wholeheartedly agree with the comments made by my colleagues. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bellamy, would you like to reply? Council is being asked to recognise the services of Ms Delcy Gale, that she be honoured as a Freeman of the Borough, and that the Council hold a special meeting to confer the freedom of the Borough at a date to be confirmed. Can I ask for a vote, please? Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? That motion is carried. Thank you. Item 17, appointments. We have appointments to confirm as set out in the order paper, namely the standing membership of the Corporate Parenting Board. Is that agreed? Okay. Thank you. That concludes the business of the Council, and I now declare the meeting closed at 9:35. Before we leave, may I wish you all a very happy festive season, and you are all invited, councillors and officers, into the Mayor's Parlour for some festive refreshments. Thank you.